Space shapes behaviors. Behaviors create culture, and culture drives results. This is the More Than a Chair podcast by Business Furniture and Choreo, where we're creating space for innovation, for dreamers, and for the next big idea. Thank you for joining us for the More Than a Chair podcast by Business Furniture and Choreo. Today, we're going to be talking about longing for connection. It's something we're all feeling right now in the midst of this global pandemic, social distancing, shelter in place. We're excited to have on our guest, Mary Beth Oakes, CEO of Business Furniture and Choreo. Hey, Mary Beth. Good morning. And we also have a very special guest, Bryan Brenner, CEO and founder of First Person. Hey, Bryan.
Good morning. Thank you.
So we're so happy to have you guys here. Now, to give you a little background for our listeners, First Person is a benefits and compensation advisory firm with decades of experience helping clients navigate the changing workforce. Now, Bryan Brenner built First Person to advise organizations in the selection of comprehensive and cost-effective benefits, a key component in the attraction and retention of top talent in today's competitive marketplace. Did I get all that right?
You did. Wow. Good for you. Thank you.
Okay, so Bryan, Mary Beth and I were talking about who would be the perfect person for us to have on for the first episode of the More Than a Chair podcast to talk about just our current climate right now. And we know that First Person helps clients with the constantly changing workforce, but right now we are facing more change and faster than ever before. How is First Person helping to coach people through this?
Well, that's right, Amanda. Certainly, these times are not something we planned for or could have anticipated in any way. But I think what has struck me is the resilience of our customers, of our own people to really step up, come together, support one another, and find unique and amazing ways to do so. So there's certainly kind of two maybe segments to explore. One would be, what are we practically doing to help employers get through this? There are tons and tons of details, decisions, new regulations, laws, challenges to work through. But then there's also the people side, which is, how are people feeling? How are they doing? What does it mean to be maybe isolated in your own home, for days on end, and yet still have to function in professional ways and things like that. So our people are working on both of those. There's a lot of technical work. There's a lot of, interpretation and phone calls and back and forth to help people make good, confident decisions, to feel like they're headed in the right direction, doing the right things, sustaining their businesses. And then there's the, how do we, really think about the humanity of this and what it really means? So we can explore both of those because they're both very present and real for us right now.
Absolutely. That humanity part, Mary Beth, we've talked a lot about that, how we're all longing for connection right now as humans, as leaders, as coworkers. How do you stay connected with your team right now as the CEO? I mean, I know because I get to talk to you every day, but how are you seeing some of the effects of how we're longing for connection, and how are you staying connected?
Well, we have really tried to schedule daily touch points. We're trying to be very intentional. And it's interesting, right? Because we have Zoom, we have Microsoft Teams, we have lots of technology tools, so we can actually see each other. And at the beginning of this time, it seems like people were kind of uncomfortable with being on camera. And now I think everybody really likes it. So it's a great way to stay connected. But I will say that those daily touch points are really critical. Even if it's just for 5 minutes, I think everybody is longing for that connection. They want to have conversations, and they want to see somebody else and really just know that they are still a team, even if they can't be together. So I think it's all about intention. It's really just about, being intentional about staying connected with the people on your team.
Absolutely. Bryan, what advice do you have for leaders and managers who are navigating these new, just weird environments?
Well, I think there's a few kind of a macro situation that's happening is that, more people are having to rely upon public assistance than ever before, or what they might have thought. And so I think one thing as employers that we found important for just all people is to help folks understand that no one created the situation. No one put themselves on unemployment or whatnot, that there's actually a positive thing happening here where the government, employers, individuals are stepping up to support people. So I think number one is just making sure that we set the right mindset that, it's not bad to have to rely upon others right now. It's good. It's important. And the more we do that, the more resilient we become and the quicker we get through this. I think then the more one-to-one person part of this is, finding new ways to connect, being very intentional about sending a text message and checking in, or, doing a FaceTime as opposed to just a phone call, or, sending something small, a gift, a note, a card, just being a little more thoughtful and intentional, I think goes a really long way. I think humans it's difficult when you can't see people, and sometimes out of sight, out of mind. So I've seen our leaders who are doing the best stay very intentional about making sure that they're connecting with each individual and also checking in on their family. How are things going there? We instituted something, our VP of People, Matt Henry, who's just a remarkable human and a great leader. He instituted about week, I think, 3. And he had anticipated week 3 would have been the toughest, week 3 of lockdown. And I was like, oh, no, it's going to be fine. I'm good. And it turned out it was a really tough week. So we did a red, yellow, green. And so when you were talking to somebody, you say, are you red, yellow, or green? And it just opened up this incredible connection to really be honest and share. And I think that made that little bitty thing made such a difference.
Gosh, I love that. That's a really great
Isn't
little
that great?
tip for Yeah, that's a great idea, conversation starter. Because sometimes, I think we're all trying to get our work done, but we are facing some just really different difficulties, things we've never faced before. For both of you, what's kind of the virtual coffee talk right now? In the beginning, we were talking all about working from home and Zoom meetings and planning that. Is it time to start pivoting and preparing for how we're going to connect? What's next? How we're going to start planning for some of this? Mary Beth, I know we've talked a little bit about this.
It's definitely time. I would say about 2 weeks ago, I heard the conversation start to shift, right? Because we start to have indications that we might be flattening the curve and there might be an opportunity in the near future for employees to return back to the workplace. So obviously there's a lot of anxiety around that. There's a lot of hope around that. But I think it's all about really planning and how do we make our employees feel safe and feel like they can return to work and to be productive. Everybody wants that connection. Everybody wants to be together. But how do we really give people what they need and still be safe? And so I think that's the conversation right now. How will workplaces need to change, right? Do we have to make physical changes to our workplaces?
Mm-hmm.
Do we have to really focus more about the behavioral changes? Like, what are people going to have to do differently than when they went home to start working, right? So that the conversation definitely has pivoted. And I think over the next few weeks, everyone's really going to be focused on that.
Yeah. What do you think, Bryan? Do you think it's time to start talking about the what's next? We've kind of moved past some of this. What are the conversations happening in your office?
Yeah, I do think that it's shifting. I led a webcast yesterday for small businesses through the Indy Chamber, and the conversation was still, layoffs and furloughs. There are still certainly people struggling through to sort of catch up to how to make those decisions, what the differentials are, how that relates to the PPP. So there's still a technical component and sort of a business stabilization. But I do feel a pivot just this week to conversations around, how do we ease back in? What's that going to look like? What are some of the really interesting things that have to be considered for physical space? We're a professional firm. We've never had to think about things like OSHA standards or safety. We walk into the office and, talk to people and have a snack and sit in a nice chair and, body hug each other, things like this. And so for us, there's this whole world of exploration where we're going to have to, become more cognizant of just a different way of thinking. I think it's an exciting time for people like us to begin to rely upon some folks that have expertise that we can, really learn from, folks who've worked in environments that are, heavy safety related and have lots of regulation. Those are going to be some of the leaders that step up next, I think, and help us think about how to do that in a way that's positive. So I will be learning in this part of it.
Absolutely. And Mary Beth, those are the conversations that are happening amongst, dealers who work in business furniture and are planning space for the future and designing for distance. I know there's so much to uncover. This has all happened so fast, but what are some of the ideas that are being kind of thrown around when you think about trying to still have that connection? We're all longing for connection. But could space look different in the future? Could our offices be different?
It's an interesting concept, right? Because we know right now the social distancing standard is 6 feet, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so if you had to go back into your workplace and suddenly start making sure that everybody could be 6 feet apart, I mean, obviously there's some challenges with that, right? So
Absolutely.
I think yeah, so I think it's going to be on a spectrum, right? So I think on a spectrum, there are going to have to be a lot of behavioral changes. And as I mentioned, there could be some space changes. So I spent a lot of time in the past 2 weeks talking to our clients because they really are starting to think about this. And I know some interesting things that are happening. Like I know one client was saying they really like their workplace strategy. They like the fact that it's a very agile, collaborative type of an environment, but they want to be sensitive to the health and safety of employees that are returning to work. So I know one idea was maybe they have some teams that initially work on Mondays and Wednesdays and other teams that initially work on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and maybe Friday is a work from home day for people.
Wow.
So, I think that's one type of a strategy,
Mm-hmm.
at least initially, right? It's for people to feel comfortable. I know that, another strategy might be around, people wearing masks to the office and, still really focusing on the washing your hands and having lots of options to sanitize spaces. Or maybe even in another scenario, maybe people are going to be sitting like with one workstation in between them.
Mm-hmm.
So we're hearing some things like that. I think generally speaking, nobody wants to panic. Nobody wants to overreact. Everybody really wants to think this through. In the past decade, organizations around central Indiana and Ohio and the markets that we work in, I know they've made big investments in their workplaces, right? So, and they're happy with what they've done. So they don't necessarily want to go backwards, but they do want to consider, the health and safety of the employees. And, one client said to me, gosh, does this mean I should start putting tall panels up again?
Mm.
And I think he answered his own question. He said, not necessarily. He said, because we were having a struggle before with innovation and bringing people together, and those panels were barriers. And so he said, I don't know really if that is the answer. And then you start to think about if you did put panels up, I mean, think about, the more surfaces that you have, right? The more germs that could potentially build up and the more spaces that you have to sanitize and keep clean. So it really is kind of a fascinating discussion right now because if you think about where we were when we got into the pandemic, really where we were basically in this place where we wanted to be more connected. We wanted to find opportunities for collaboration, connection,
Mm-hmm.
and innovation. And our businesses still require that. Our people still require that.
Yeah.
So I think initially it's just going to be a tricky balance of how do you do that? How do you get that? But also keep people safe and healthy. And I do think it's going to be a blend of making some modifications potentially to your space, but also really focusing on helping people to really adapt behaviors.
Absolutely. Now, what do you guys think about, virtual work, work from home, remote work? It's often been thought of as a perk for employees. Do you see this status changing now that we've kind of seen how we can all work remote? Many of us can continue to do our job. Do you think that status may change a bit, Bryan?
That's a really interesting question. I've never personally thought of working from home as a perk, but I know that certainly it has been in certain environments. I think what I hope happens is that there's just a more open mindset around just work in general and what it means to work and to be effective and productive. And so I think in my mind, people should do what makes sense to them. And, we've always had a very free and open environment. I know not every culture or type of business can be quite as flexible, but I'm hopeful and I'm starting to see this opportunity to really embrace who are people, what is important to them. Some people, it's really hard to work from home. They become isolated. They don't like it. They're distracted. They don't have this kind of environment even, or maybe can afford amenities that would make that really nice. And so coming to work is a respite, domestic issues, there's just a lot to consider. And so I think hopefully employers are becoming a lot more focused on just individuals and people and what's really going to make someone successful in an environment? How do we support them? It's funny, Business Furniture was kind enough to gift me with an opportunity to have a wonderful desk and an ergonomic chair, and that came this last week. And so thank you again, Mary Beth and Dick Oakes for that. And I showed up and I just felt so different that next week. But whereas I was doing my best in other environments, and I bought a little, stand-up desky thing from Amazon, and but I just was getting uncomfortable. My body didn't feel good, and it's little things like that where, because someone took the care to connect to me and offer something, it made a real difference. So I think I'm hopeful employers will just be much more flexible in their mindset. That's really what I'm hoping happens.
Yeah.
We'll see.
For sure. Well, your space make a difference.
I think it's a couple of things too. I think you're right about that, Bryan, because I remember the first week that we were all working from home. I thought, you know what, I'm just going to stay in the kitchen so I can stay close to my husband and my dogs and kind of feel more connected to the rest of the house. Well, that worked for about maybe 3 days. And then I just was having a hard time focusing and concentrating. So I went into my home office. And so that did make a difference. I mean, it made me feel like I really could be more productive. But, I kind of guessed in the beginning. I thought, oh, my goodness, I bet our team is going to love this. And I'm not sure, maybe they're never going to want to come back to the office. And just in doing some pulse checks with all the teams across our company, everybody is so ready to come back to the office. Extroverts, introverts, they miss that human connection. Now, we did a survey with our team really to kind of understand where they were about remote working. And we were working remotely before. So even before this pandemic hit, our employees had the opportunity to work from home a day or two when they needed to, or whenever it made the most sense for them. They had the tools and we had the protocols set up around that. We have a belief that we want to manage by results and lead by results rather than, leading by or managing by seeing people, right? So we've had that flexibility. But, I just wondered if people would want to come back. Well, we did this survey with our employees, and overwhelmingly, they all still would like to have that opportunity to work from home when they need to, a day or two a week. But overwhelmingly, they would rather spend the majority of their time in the space because they feel like that's where they can do their best work. And the best work, yes, has to do with the space, but it also has to do with just having that human face-to-face interaction where you can have conversations and be together. So I think, Amanda, I really do think that most companies, ours included, I mean, we're going to go ahead with remote working. And I'm hoping that through this whole situation that organizations that might have had challenges with that for whatever reason, I'm hoping that they see that it is a viable way of working, because it is a viable way of working. It just requires you to think about it a little bit differently. And I think it goes back to that word intention, right? Everything you're doing has to be much more intentional rather than just assuming you're going to see somebody, right? You have to be intentional about it. But I think it's going to keep going. I really do. I think it's going to be a blend of being together in a space and being apart, when you need to work remotely.
And what about some of the worries about having your team so remote? I know that there are worries like, okay, are they actually working? And, maybe how does an employee make sure that they are still seen as valuable when they're not, passing the boss in the hall to say good morning? Some of that pressure working from home, it's a new mindset, right? For management and employees. How do you advise clients and other leaders to kind of change their mindset when it comes to if their employees are doing enough work? And then how, as an employee, do you make sure that everybody knows you're still there? You're not just some random voice on the other line of a conference call. What do you guys think?
Well, another thing that's changed, I think, is really the whole notion around childcare, right? I mean, with schools being closed right now, daycares being closed. I mean, we are in a situation where all of us, all leaders, all companies, we have to be flexible and we have to support families and parents. It's just, there's never been a more important time for that. So, I know on our team, we believe it starts with trust, right? I mean, you have to trust the output. You have to trust that that your employees have objectives. So I guess I would always start out by saying, make sure that, you really set clear objectives for what's expected or what's needed or what the goals are. And that way, at the end of the day, at the end of the week, at the end of the month, you have something to look back on and see if you hit those goals and you hit those measurements. And I guess one thing I would always recommend, if you're concerned about something or someone or a situation, I recommend just being transparent and vulnerable and have a conversation. And it goes a long way. I mean, especially, those one-on-one conversations right now are just priceless, so that's what I would recommend.
Absolutely. What are you saying to your team, Bryan?
I think that what this has taught us is that whatever is true during a pandemic was largely true before. And so there are folks who are struggling to be productive for various reasons. There are folks who really are nailing it, everything in between. And I think in the word Mary Beth used earlier, intentionality means a lot to me. And even more so now. I think sometimes when we're in a routine and things are kind of going along and things are good, it's easy to just kind of fall into patterns and not connect intentionally with people, not ask questions, not check in with how people are doing. And the pandemic has just given us, we don't have that luxury, even if that was a good thing. And so I think what's happening now is leaders are much more aware of the need to be intentional and to think things through and to connect in and to, just do those extra things that really help us truly know how someone's doing and what's going on and the likelihood of productivity. So my hope is that continues, and I think it will. I think I think we're all learning some important lessons through this, and maybe what we thought was okay to not pay attention to before really isn't, and are things that we should be super thoughtful about. So I'm seeing a great step up in leadership all around.
Isn't that true? Things suddenly become very, very clear. And I have to share that we stole a pro tip, or we borrowed a pro tip from First Person and from Bryan. Bryan shared with me a matrix of priorities that they had created. And these are, some of the things might have been things that are just a part of their business plan that they would normally focus on, but some of them really were related specifically to the pandemic and COVID-19 and just the priorities around that they were looking at as a leadership team. And we borrowed that model. And I will tell you that really, if you can get a priority, like a matrix priority together with your leadership team that you can share with your company, it really does help with clarity and to help everybody to understand what are the measures you're trying to hit right now, and how have those measures changed, since the pandemic hit. So, having that clarity, I think, really helps too.
Yeah, I think that I appreciate you mentioning that. That was I can take no credit for that matrix, but it was something our chief strategy officer president put together with our team, kind of in the really early days, like just as we were going on lockdown. I remember had been in New York City just on the 12th and 13th, and got home just in time for sort of things to really shift. And it was very different there in New York. It was very you could feel it differently, I think. And so Mark and I were both there, and we both we were hoping to see basketball games. That didn't work out so much, and we began to feel this need to step up and lead. And he put that analysis together, that matrix, and it was really powerful to see actually how that could apply to us all the time, and how that opportunity to be really focused on a set of objectives and to be really drilled in on what are the most important things we have to do. Speaking of connection, one of those line items, Mary Beth, in the matrix was to really keep focused on growing our business, because we want to keep jobs. We want to help people keep jobs for not only us, but our customers. And so growth is really important through this time. And I'm proud to say that because of that focus, we have had great new business every single week since lockdown. And you would think that's counterintuitive. Right. How's that possible? But when you connect in with customers and you provide that connection, and you do it differently than maybe others, it stands out, and they're attracted to that. They enjoy that. So I think it just proves that whole connection, that really is how people work. That's how the human spirit works. We want that. And when we get that,
it's like clients are longing for connection, right? I mean, clients also want that connection. We want that connection, and they want that connection. They do,
because they're so terrified in ways, right? There's so many things that it's like really scary. And then there's also this sense that I'm a leader. I've got to move beyond fear into action, and I've got to step up. And so I think creating that human connection helps people tap into their resiliency, tap into their core values and what's really important and what they know they can do. even in the face of really challenging things. So it's been, as much as there's days when I'm like, oh, I'm so tired, I need to get out, I want to be with people, I wish I could just have autonomy and run an errand or walk through Target. But the nice thing is, I think that we're all really finding the best of ourselves, and that's heartening. We needed that, I think.
We sure did. I love that. Move beyond fear into action. I think that's a great message for all of us who are longing for a connection today. You guys, I want to thank you so much for being here for the More Than a Chair podcast. This has been really incredible. I do have one last question for you. Over at Business Furniture and Choreo, we talk a lot about the change curve. Where do you fall on the change curve today? And you could be in shock, denial, doubt, understanding, acceptance, or embracing new habits. Where do you think you fall today? Shock, denial, doubt, understanding, acceptance, or embracing new habits? What do you think,
Well,
Bryan?
I can certainly relate to all of those, and I will say embracing new habits. There are things about this that I'm loving that have come about for me as a person, as a leader, as a father, and a husband, and then as a business person. I mean, I'm finding opportunity. I'm excited to support people, and most days I wake up ready to go. So I feel like I've arrived at that spot, and it feels good. Thank you for asking.
Yeah. Where do you feel, Mary Beth?
I definitely am in the acceptance and the, kind of the building new habits and new ways of working. Like Bryan, I feel like I've been in all of those stages, and some days I might even go backwards a little bit. But I think generally speaking, I am in the acceptance mode and trying to meet the situation where it is, and just really trying to think about how can I do my best work where I am, and maybe take this time to sharpen my saw. I feel like I've made some time now, like for more learning and podcasts and things like that. And there might be moments in my day where previously I was driving around in my car, going from appointment to appointment. And now if I have a break in the action, I'm trying to kind of focus on, like I said, sharpening my saw. So that's been a good thing and a good opportunity to kind of build some new habits so that, we're ready for this new way of moving forward, right?
Absolutely. You guys, thank you. It's been lovely connecting with both of you today. That longing for connection for me has been fulfilled today. So thank you both for being here. That's all for today for the More Than a Chair podcast.
Thank you.
Thank you both.